what are the traditional ways in which sexuality was taught to young people, the next generation, within families? What have you seen in cultures around the world?
So I'll start with my own culture, with African American culture, and I think so. I wasn't born and raised Muslim. I accepted Islam at the age of 23, and what I've noticed in African American Muslim, general culture, is that we tend to be very conservative in terms of how we teach about sex, and
Mm,
that's because we have received a filtered down and colonized version of Islam that
mm,
has been delivered to us not from European colonialism, but from Arab colonialism
mm.
and from South Asian influence. Because when
Right.
these people came into America, they were shielding their Islam. And so they had to really sort of almost hide it in some cases, right?
Mm,
And then they're delivering it, they're filtering it to these African American people in a way that's saying, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, because we don't want anybody to really look at us or notice us. So this is haram, these things are not haram, but we just don't want to draw attention. So you have some African American communities that are extremely conservative, ultra conservative. We
mm,
don't want to talk about it. Babies just come. We don't need to say anything. We don't need to prepare our children for marriage. Conversely, in West Africa,
mm,
you have a completely different approach.
mm,
Completely different approach. So you have learning about womanhood and femininity starting from a very young age. You have young girls and young boys learning about their role within the family, but also learning how to nurture those innate gifts that they have physically
mm,
and innate roles that they will take on within the culture. So you have the concept of jonge, for example, which comes from Senegal, which is the Senegalese art of elegance and seductive confidence, right? Men
mm,
can be jonge and women can be jonge. If a woman is jonge, they call her jongama. So you'll have women who are very full-bodied. I would be considered jongama, right? A woman who in America would be considered plus size or fat, right?
mm,
Rolls on her neck, thick wrists. She is a woman who is almost like the embodiment of sexiness, the
mm,
embodiment of womanhood. She can be a very spiritual woman and also be a symbol of sexiness at the same time. It's like a cognitive dissonance when you're raised in a very conservative household.
mm,
You have in West Africa where young girls are given specific instruction on how to prepare for marriage long before they get married.
mm,
This is a part of the culture, and these are Islamic cultures. So in Senegal, where my spiritual community is 99% Muslim, but you
mm,
have people who talk openly about sex, who talk openly about the importance of pleasing your partner, who
mm,
speak openly about the importance of fulfilling the rights of your spouse, not just the right of the husband, but the
mm,
right of the wife also. So when people say, well, Muslims don't like to talk about sex, I always say, but which Muslims?
right. Yeah.
Which Muslims don't like to talk about sex? So when it comes to African Americans, I always say we need to look for where our culture comes from. Because even if you talk about, let's talk about India, right? India has a rich history of erotology,
Mm,
erotic literature, research into pleasure. But what happened? The Victorian era.
right.
You had the colonial empire, right? Arabs, same thing. Arabs invented erotology, but all of these things have been watered down through colonial influence. So I think it's important for us to take our Islam with us, but go back and look at how did our ancestors, how did they traditionally learn about what to do when you get married? Because now you have Muslims who get married and they'll reach out and they'll say, Auntie, I've been married for 6 months. My husband and I have not been able to have sex. I don't have vaginismus. There's no problem. We just don't know what to do.
Oh, wow.
And we're afraid to ask.
Subhanallah. Hmm.
So it's troubling because, like you said, that's not from our deen, but traditionally I think we've gotten so far away from our traditional cultures,
Mm.
feeling that the more religious we are, the further we have to get away from our cultures, and that's just not true.
SubhanAllah. I think that that is such an interesting. We've had another guest as well who spoke about, the influence of the Victorians and just the colonial influence on our attitudes towards, what really is. sex positive approach in Islam, right? Where sex is not bad, it's not dirty, it's not shameful, it's encouraged. You're encouraged to have lots of it and have
Mm-hmm.
lots of women as well, lots of wives, and have even more, and have more children. And, it's like, it's all good, right? So it's interesting for those of us now, because we're going into the next generation, because we've had the boomers did their thing. We've got, Gen X, like me, maybe you, the millennials. I think that they are no longer connected to whatever culture their parents came from.
Mm-hmm.
And what they would have taken is whatever their parents didn't tell them, but they went out and researched for themselves. So the millennials and then the Gen Zs, their influences are pop culture, are
Mm-hmm.
what's happening out in the world, which is almost a shame, because if they decide to start practicing and cutting out those influences, now there's a void.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what I'm saying? Like, there isn't an Islamic version of what they would have received out there in the world. So hopefully conversations like this will spark, more conversations, more work out there in the world, work like what you're doing, and what Brother Habiba Kande is doing, and what everybody who we're talking to on this series is doing, so that we have our own way of approaching almost everything in life.
Mm-hmm.
And all we want is to be able to access it so that we can live that holistically Islamic lifestyle, including in the bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
inshallah.
And I think that's why I focus very heavily on Gen Z in my
Mm,
work. I'm Gen X, I'm 46, so the majority of the people who follow me are young enough to be my children. Like I could
mashallah.
be
Yeah,
their mother.
yeah,
But I realize that there's a void
yeah.
because I know what my friends who have children in their 20s haven't told them. I
Hmm.
don't have children in my 20s. My children are young, but I know what my nieces and nephews don't know. So I want to stand in to fill in that gap because you're right. Once they say, okay, I really want to lean into my deen more,
Yeah.
but I still need to know all of these things about life. I want to be able to show them, well, listen, I'm Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
and let me tell you what you can do. Let me help you to fill those voids that you have because what you said is absolutely correct. We've gotten so far away, which is why I focus a lot on reclaiming those cultures and taking what's good from our past and merging it with the present.